Today we're going to install a 20 by 30 one-piece top tent. The first thing the guys will do is take the tent bag off of the tent and unroll the tent section so that they can unfold the tent. You want to untie the tent section while it's still in a roll before you lay it on the ground so that you don't have to move the section around while it's still in a roll and heavy. This will wear a hole in the tent due to abrasion. You unroll the tent like the guys are doing here, and then you begin to unfold the tent one fold at a time. The reason you unfold it one fold at a time is if you were to reach inside the tent and grab the edge and unfold several folds at once, this would move the heavy tent across the ground and it could wear a hole in the tent due to abrasion where it would come into contact with any sort of stones or sticks or other rough objects that you might have on the ground, especially if you're on asphalt or concrete. After you get the tent unfolded halfway, then your helper will walk down to the other end of the tent and grab the far corner of the tent, and the two of you pull away from each other, and then you lay the second half of the tent out on the ground. Then you go ahead and square the tent up. You take all four corners and you pull them away from each other until the tent is nice and square so that it will be lined up properly for laying out the hardware. Laying out the hardware basically consists of taking the side poles around the tent and laying them in the proper location. You will get one side pole at each corner and one side pole at each brass grommet on the tent where you see the white guy rope. Each corner requires two stakes. Each stake will be 90 degrees off the corner, about 5 feet from the edge of the tent. The next thing we have to do is drive the stakes. You will want to drive your stakes in as far as possible. Normally you only want to leave about 6 inches of the stake above ground level. In the video, since this is strictly for demonstration purposes, we probably will not drive the stakes all the way in because the tent will only be up for about an hour. But in your situation, you will want to drive the stakes in as far as you can get them. The further the stakes go in, the better. This gives you more holding power for your ropes. A 12-pound hammer or even a 16-pound sledgehammer will work fine for driving the stakes. Now that the stakes are all in, we need to attach the guy ropes to the stakes. First of all, you want to attach the two guy ropes at any of the four corners, and when you do, leave plenty of slack in the rope so that you'll be able to push the side pole up when we get ready to raise the perimeter. After you get the ropes attached to the first two stakes at the first corner, then you will walk down to the next corner and attach the ropes to the two stakes at that corner. The same is true for the next two corners. You will attach the ropes to all four corners first. Once you have all your guy ropes attached, now you can start to raise the perimeter of the tent. Here again, you start at any of the four corners. You take the side pole and you insert the pin that is on top of the side pole into the brass grommet at the corner of the tent. Then you stand the pole up. After that, you walk to the opposite corner, and if you have a helper, it helps. One person can insert the pole into the tent and push it up while the other person is there available to adjust the guy ropes if need be. After the pole is pushed up on the second corner, then you will walk to the opposite corner and install the two side poles on the opposite end of the tent. You'll put the side pole into the third corner of the tent and raise the third corner up, and then you'll walk over and raise the side pole on the fourth corner up. Once you have all four corners stood up, then it will be time to start inserting the side poles in the ends of the tent, in the middle of the end, as well as both sides of the tent. When you insert the side poles, go ahead and attach the guy ropes to the stakes as well, but leave the guy ropes attached loosely. Remember that we need the slack in order to be able to raise the center poles. When you have all the side poles all the way around the tent inserted, and all of the guy ropes attached. Then you have all the hard part over with, and the next step will be to go around and tie all of the jump ropes. At each side pole there's about a 5-foot long what we call a jump rope that hangs down from the tent. You'll take the rope and go around the pole, make a half hitch up close to the top of the pole, then pull the rope down and go round and round the pole as tight as you can. You will do this at every single side pole all the way around the tent. The purpose of the jump rope is to attach the side pole to the tent so that when the tent moves, the pole cannot fall out and cut your tent or injure someone. This is very important. Once all the jump ropes are secured, then we can begin to insert and raise the center poles. What you do is you walk into the center of the tent to the first center pole hole, and you will insert the pin that is on the top of the center pole into the center pole hole. After you insert the pin, you push the pole up a little bit, and then you take the jump rope that is attached to the tent and you make a half hitch on the pole and push the half hitch up close to the top of the pole. Then you make a second half hitch about a foot down from the top of the pole. After that, you can go ahead and push the pole on up and leave it slanted at about a 30-degree angle. You'll also want to go ahead and finish tying the rope at that point. Now you can insert the second center pole. The process is the same. You insert the pole into the center pole hole and you put your half hitch, both of them, on the pole, tie your rope off, and push the pole up. Once you get both poles up about 30 degrees, then you can go ahead and push them both up, straight up and down. You want the poles to be completely vertical at this point. Now that the center poles are up and vertical and the ropes are tied, we can start to tighten the tent. The way you normally tighten a tent is you go to one of the corners of the tent and you will want to tighten that corner, but not extremely tight, just snug, because you don't want to pull the tent out of square. One person tilts the pole inward towards the center of the tent. The other person can take the slack out of the rope, and then you help each other push the tent pole up until it's nearly vertical. After you get the first corner tight, then you walk to the opposite corner, and you'll get that corner as tight as you can on the rope that is pulling against the corner that you just tightened. But the corner rope that is pulling against the opposite end of the tent that you haven't tightened yet, you just want to get it snug, because if you get it too tight, you'll pull your tent out of square. After you get the ropes adjusted, push the pole vertical, and then you walk to the opposite end of the tent. Once you get to the opposite end of the tent, the first corner there, you want to go ahead and tighten the rope that is pulling against the end of the tent where you just were as tight as you can, but the rope that's pulling against the corner where you have not tightened yet, you just want it snug so you don't pull your tent out of square. After you get your ropes adjusted, go ahead and push the tent pole up until it's nearly vertical, and at that point you will walk over to the fourth corner of the tent, and on this corner you will attempt to tighten both of the ropes as tight as you can get them. After you get the four corners tight, you want to go back and look at the corners of the tent and make sure that you have not pulled anything out of square. If you've pulled a corner out of square, you may need to loosen a rope on one side of the tent and tighten it on the opposite side to pull the tent back in square. After all the four corners are adjusted properly, then you tighten the pole that is in the center of the 20-foot side of the tent, and then you walk to the opposite end of the tent and you tighten the side pole that is in the center of that end. After you have all four corners tight and the poles in the short sides of the tent tight, then you'll walk over to one of the long sides of the tent and you will tighten those poles and those ropes, but there again you want to leave them fairly snug so that you don't pull your tent out of square. If you tighten the first side too tight, then it'll bow the tent out on that side. After you get those two poles and those ropes tight, then you walk to the opposite side of the tent and you will tighten now these ropes as tight as you can get them, because the other side of the tent has been secured, so now you can tighten the tent really tight. You may have to check all the ropes 2 or 3 times to make sure that every rope is completely tight and does not have any slack at all whatsoever in it. It takes a little extra time to do this double checking, but it's well worth it. Just go up to each pole, check your rope, and if it seems loose, then knock your pole back inside, retighten the rope, and push the side pole up again. Every rope should be extremely tight. When all the ropes are good and tight, then you will want to tie off the ends of the guy ropes. You can see the guys doing that in this shot. You basically take the end of the guy rope, make a loop, or a half hitch if you will, and pull it up onto the tight part of the rope. The tent is nearly finished, and the only thing we lack is sidewalls. To hang the sidewalls, you choose a spot where you would like to have your primary entrance, your doorway, and that's where you will put 2 rolls of sidewall, and you will untie the rolls, and then you unroll the rolls in opposite directions, parallel to the edge of the tent, between the side poles and the guy ropes and the stakes. Once you get your 2 rolls unrolled, then you will take the end of the sidewall and pull it between the stakes and the side poles, around the corner, and as far as you can go until the sidewall reaches the end. It's helpful if you have 2 people. One person can pull the wall and the other one can help feed the wall around the corner pole. You'll pull the first roll of wall out, and then you return to where you started, and you take the second roll of wall and you do the same thing again. You repeat the process. You pull the sidewall out around the edge of the tent, between the side poles and the ropes, until you get to the end of the sidewall. The next thing that you will do is you begin hanging the sidewall in the center of where you would like to have your doorway. At the top of the sidewall there is a series of snaps, and those snaps hook into a rope that runs around the perimeter of the tent that we call the sidewall rope or the curtain rope. There again, if you have 2 people, one person can pull the wall tight and the other person can snap the wall, and it helps get the wall up nice and tight so that it's not sagging. When you get the wall up around the tent, you'll need to return to those perimeter ropes, the sidewall ropes, at the corner of the tent, and untie the knot where it was tied from the factory. Pull the rope tight so that there's no slack in the curtain rope. You do this on all 4 corners. Then you take your second piece of wall and you overlap the first piece of wall by 5 feet. And then you start hanging the second wall exactly the same way that you hung the first wall. One person pulls the wall tight, and another person can come along behind, snapping the snaps up into the sidewall rope. You want the sidewall to be fairly tight, fairly stretched, so that it doesn't sag. When you get all of the sidewall hung up, then you can go back and create your doorway. To create the doorway, what you do is you unsnap the end of the sidewall and you fold it back towards the larger part of the sidewall and hang it back onto the curtain rope again. The second sidewall, you will fold the end back like you see them doing here and hang it up on the curtain rope as well. This creates your doorway. Now, to close the doorway, all you do is unsnap the end of the wall that you just snapped up, and you return it to the original position and re-snap it to the curtain rope. After you create your doorway, then you're completely finished with the installation. Now that the tent is up, we're going to tear it down. When you tear down your tent, you want to make sure that you do it on a day when the tent is completely dry. The tent needs to be completely dry and the ground as well. The first thing that you do is you drop the sidewalls so that you can fold them up. You simply start at one end of the sidewall and you start unsnapping the snaps and allow the curtain to fall on the ground until you get to the end of the snaps, and you'll have all the sidewall laying on the ground between the side poles and the stakes. This is why you want to make sure the ground is dry. After you drop all your sidewall, the next thing that you will do will be to untie the ends of the guy ropes. Remember, we tied them up so they would look nice. Now you walk around and you untie all the ropes. However, you do leave the rope attached to the stake. When you have untied all your guy rope ends, the next thing to do will be to fold the sidewall. When you fold the sidewall, you simply pull the sidewall out into a location where you can pile it up to make it easier to fold. You will need a helper. It takes two people. You grab the edges of the sidewall and you pull away from each other to sort of keep the sidewall flat, and you pull the sidewall towards you and pile it up in a pile to make it easier to fold the wall. Once you have your sidewall in a pile, you take the end of the wall and you lay it out on the ground nice and flat, and you go to the first seam and you each pull away from each other on that seam and fold it over accordion style. Every time you reach for the seam and you pull away from the other person to keep it tight. Each seam folds over to the edge of the stack, and that gives you a nice stack of wall that you'll be able to roll up in a very small, easily managed roll of sidewall. Roll the stack of wall from one end towards the other end. Our next step is to untie all the jump ropes on the side poles. Remember, we tied the jump rope on each side pole. Walk around to each side pole and untie the jump ropes. It's also a good idea at this time to go ahead and tilt the side poles inward towards the center of the tent slightly to loosen up the rope so you can pull the pole out. Once you have all the jump ropes untied and all of the side poles tilted inward, it's time to drop the tent. The first thing to do is to start removing the side poles. You can pull the side pole out and simply pitch it outside the tent, let it lay on the ground. You want to pull all the side poles out except for the four corners. When you get all the side poles out, then you will need to untie the ropes that are on the two center poles, and you can go ahead and tilt the two center poles towards one end of the tent, and then you will remove one center pole first of all and take it outside the tent, and then you remove the second center pole. When you get both center poles outside the tent, then you can drop your corner side poles. When you have all your side poles removed, then it's time to get ready to fold the tent. In order to fold the tent, now you'll need to go back and untie all the guy ropes from the stakes. When you do this, you go ahead and throw the guy rope inside of the tent so that it will be inside the tent when you get ready to fold the tent. You and your helper will each grab one corner of the tent and you pull away from each other and fold it over on top of the other half of the tent. When you get there, then you take all four corners and you pull away from each other to tighten the tent and lay it out flat. After that, you walk over to the center of the tent where the center poles were, and you pull the center pole rope out from underneath the tent and stretch the tent again so that it's laying flat with no wrinkles. Then you take the two corners of one end and you fold it into the center of the tent, and you will do this 2 or 3 times depending on the size of your tent. You fold it over again, and then you walk to the opposite end of the tent and you grab those corners and you fold that end of the tent once again into the center. In this case, they'll do it twice. After you fold both halves into the center, then you will fold one half of the stack over on top of the other half of the stack. And now the tent section is ready to roll up. Beginning at the end that has the valance, you roll the tent section towards the center where the center pole ropes are. You can throw one of the center pole ropes up inside the roll. The second center pole rope you will use to tie the tent roll so that it will fit into the bag. After you get the tent tied, then you will take your protective bag, stand the section up on one end, and then slip the bag over the end of the tent section. Once the bag is over the tent, then you will take the tent and flip it over, pull the bag up, and tie it off. The last thing that we need to do is pull the tent stakes. To pull the stakes, you take a sledgehammer and you hit each stake 3 or 4 times on each side of the stake to loosen the stake up in the hole. Sometimes you'll have to do it several hits, but when you get the stake loose, then you pull the stake out of the hole. The most important thing to remember about teardown is be sure that the tent is completely dry and that the ground is completely dry so that the tent does not pick up moisture from the ground.